Welcome to today's 5-minute Bible study in the book of Daniel. We're continuing to look at Daniel chapter 8, Daniel's second vision. Remember where we stopped yesterday? The Greek Empire under Alexander the Great had come to dominance. But then Alexander died. That's the big horn being broken off. And then 4 more horns grow out of the goat's head. Those are the 4 kingdoms that will arise out of the original empire of Alexander, each ruled over by one of Alexander's generals. They will each establish a dynasty in their area. Now, the next part of the vision, Daniel begins to focus on one of those horns, one of those generals who was Seleucus, establishing the Seleucid dynasty in Syria. And the horn that will eventually rise up, the little horn. Remember the little horn from chapter 7, the first vision, that would oppress the people of God, try to change the laws of God, the ways of God, draw people away from worshiping God. Now we're back to the little horn. So we see he is one of the Seleucid kings who will come, and he will oppress the people of God. Daniel talks about this part of the vision, verse 9 and following. It says, out of one of them came another horn, which started small, but grew in power to the south, to the east, and toward the beautiful land. The beautiful land is the promised land, Jerusalem, the home of the Jews, people of God. Now this horn grew until it reached the host of heaven, and threw some of the starry host down to the earth, and trampled upon them. It set itself up to be as great as the commander of the army of the Lord. So this king sets him up as though he were God, demanding you worship him rather than God. Blasphemous words, as we saw in chapter 7. This horn took away the daily sacrifice from the Lord, and the sanctuary was thrown down. In other words, he's going to stop the sacrifices to the Lord in the temple. He's going to desecrate the temple. Because of rebellion, the Lord's people and the daily sacrifice were given over to it. It prospered in everything it did. Truth was thrown to the ground. So we see this blasphemous assault by this king, attempting to stop worship of the true God. Truth is thrown down. He is a king of the lie. Now, at the latter part of the chapter, when Gabriel interprets the vision for Daniel, he talks about the little horn, verse 23. He says, in the latter part of their reign, when rebels have become completely wicked, a fierce-looking king, a master of intrigue, will arise. This is the little horn, a fierce king, a master of intrigue and deceit. He will become very strong, but not by his own power. He will cause astounding devastation. He will succeed in whatever he does. He will destroy those who are mighty, the holy people. Makes war against the people of God. He will cause deceit to prosper. Remember, the truth is thrown down. He will consider himself superior. When they feel secure, he will destroy many. He will take his stand against the prince of princes. Now, this is the ultimate blasphemy. He speaks against the very God of heaven and declares himself, as it were, to be God. Yet he will be destroyed, but not by human power, but by the judgment of God. The vision of the evenings and the mornings that has been given to you is true. Seal up the vision. It concerns the future. Okay, so who is this little horn? Who is this deceitful king who will arise and do these things? We've already established that in the second vision of Daniel, chapter 8, we're talking about the kingdoms that come out of the Greek Empire. And one of those is the Seleucid dynasty in Syria. This little horn, this mighty king, is one of the Seleucid rulers in the 2nd century BC. He rules around the year 167 BC. We know who this is from history. Now, for Daniel, of course, it was a future event, but we look back and we see this historical happening. This was a king by the name of Antiochus IV. He was also called Antiochus Epiphanes, and he did exactly what Daniel had seen he would do in the vision. This Antiochus had conquered the promised land. He had brought the Jewish state under his sovereignty, and he attempted to abolish the people of God. He outlawed Judaism. He outlawed the worship of the true God. He desecrated the temple. and he demanded that the sacrifices to the Lord be stopped. When I say he desecrated the temple, what he did, he took the altar of God in which they offered the sacrifices to the Lord, and on that altar he offered a sacrifice to Zeus, the Greek god. And the sacrifice he offered was a pig. This desecrated the temple. It destroyed the sanctuary. This occurred in 167 BC. So we see this assault against the things of God. We see this oppression of the ways of God. We see an attempt to destroy the people of God. Antiochus basically said it is illegal to worship the God of Israel, the God of the Jews. He outlawed it. Daniel foresaw this coming. Now, in so many ways, Antiochus IV, or Antiochus Epiphanes, is the Antichrist of the Old Testament. He is a type of the Antichrist talked about in the New Testament. When you get to the New Testament, it talks about the coming of the Antichrist. In many ways, they're drawing from what Antiochus had done in 167 BC. He is the Antichrist of the Old Testament. He is the type of all the Antichrists who are to come. And Daniel had seen this. He had seen that Antiochus would rise, and he had seen what he would do. We'll talk a little bit more about Antiochus tomorrow, what that prophesies about the ways of God. But for now, we're going to leave it here, and we're going to pick this up again in our next 5-minute Bible study in the book of Daniel. Please join us.